Yeah, of course, sure thing. So I'm Hazel Savage. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Musiio. I describe us as an artificial intelligence company for the music industry. We're B2B, and what that means is built an artificial intelligence that can listen to music. So the way I often describe it is 15 years ago when I worked in a record store, I would put the new CDs out on the shelf ready for Monday morning because, of course, all new music came out on the same day in Europe. And sometimes on a really quiet week, there'd be maybe one or two. On a really busy week, 5 or 6 CDs. And now you have companies, the biggest streaming services in the world, saying they have 40,000 new tracks a day coming out. So the volume of content has gone from very small and manageable to absolutely huge. So we help companies use artificial intelligence to automate a lot of their processes. I've been in the music industry for a long time. So as I say, about 15 years, started in a record store, worked for Shazam in the UK. I worked for Universal Music, Pandora Internet Radio, and a bunch of other startups. And I started Musiio 2.5 years ago with my co-founder in Singapore.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually had a conversation with you previously also, I think, if I can recall. So yeah, I think you graduated from Entrepreneur First, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are your hobbies? Who is your role model?
Good question. So I play guitar, which is kind of how I got started in the music industry. I sort of went to just had a very traditional upbringing in school, just studied the regular maths, English, science, didn't really think of music as a career, but I got my first guitar when I was 13. And from then, I was just always playing music. I was performing in a band. I was, managing artists. And then eventually the thing that was my hobby became my full-time job when I was like, oh, it turns out I'm quite good at this and I do this all the time. So why not make a career out of it? But really, so I would say playing music is kind of my main hobby, but it's also my job. So that's very, very uninteresting, very one-dimensional of me. What else do I enjoy doing? I mean, travel's a huge one, given that I've lived in both Australia, Singapore, but I'm from the UK originally. And in terms of role models, I think, as I say, when I look back on all the bosses that I've had, I probably, given the topic that we're talking about, haven't had a huge amount of female bosses, unfortunately. The tech industry and the music industry definitely both skew towards having more men. But, I've had some fantastic bosses that have taught me a great deal. And then you also learn a great deal from the terrible bosses that you have. You learn about how you don't want to behave and what you don't want to do. But and I mentioned this one the other day. Someone who I really look up to at the minute is a VC called Arlen Hamilton. She's really active on Twitter. She came from the entertainment industry, but now she's raised a fund, Backstage Capital, and they're investing in sort of minority founders. So it's not so much that I necessarily see myself entering like VC or investment, but when I see a woman doing something that not a lot of women have done before, I think it's really impressive, and she's really sort of changing up the game. So those are people that I look up to.
That's so awesome to hear, actually. So it's been 15 years, that you are in music industry. So what has been this road like for you? What has been your journey, right from when you studied to till this date? What has been your journey?
Yeah, so when I was studying, I just studied politics and English at Newcastle University. And I studied sort of a traditional academic degree because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And in fact, when I was at university or when I first started my career, the iPhone didn't exist. This was pre-2007. So pretty much all of the companies I've worked for, such as Shazam and Pandora, are apps and rely heavily on smartphones as an ecosystem. And that didn't even exist. So I went to university just for lack of anything better to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, which I don't know anyone at sort of 19 to 20, 21, 22 who does. But after that, I then sort of got my first job, which I was working while I was at university, just on the weekends in the record store, just in retail. And then after I finished, I went full time. But really, I didn't necessarily have any kind of massive immediate passion. I wasn't sure how I was going to turn working in a store into a full-time job. But, you know, luckily I kept at it. I kept grafting, kept applying for other roles, and then eventually I got a job, an interview, and then finally the job at Shazam, which at the time I was like employee number 25. Again, the iPhone still hadn't come out. It was a very small British startup, and so really, you know, then once you've had a few jobs, once you've got your foot on the ladder, then it's your responsibility to turn it into something from there. But yeah, I don't come from a family that work in this industry, and I certainly didn't go about it maybe the very traditional way.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So what are some of the obstacles you faced while working in this industry or while being on this road?
Obstacles I've faced. I mean, I'm trying to think of one, because I sort of, when I think about an obstacle, maybe I'm trying to think of something that has completely stopped me from doing something or completely prevented the path that I'm on. But I generally don't see obstacles like that. It's generally something can be a challenge, but at the same time be something that you can overcome. And in fact, that's the main attitude. If you have the resilience and the grit to be able to face whatever the challenges are, you know, and there are certainly, I look at it more like a graph, and there are, you know, the more stressful times, and then there are the easier times. But one of my friends gave me my favorite quote on that, which is, when everything's going well, you don't learn anything. So you really only learn things when it's going wrong or when it's tough. But I still don't think of them as insurmountable challenges. You know, there are just tough things like raising money is tough. You know, how you get that deal over the line, making your first sale is tough. But you know, you either figure out how to do it or you kind of go around the problem, which I've done quite a few times as well. But yeah, so nothing insurmountable yet.
Awesome. So, okay. So, what are some of the key achievements you actually achieved throughout this, you know, being on this journey? And yeah.
I think, you know, it's really difficult because there are so many, and it's usually I don't think of it as like the goal. I do think of it as the experience, which is the valuable part. But raising VC rounds, you know, we've raised $2 million as a company to date, and I think that's something that not very many people can do or have done. So that's one of my favorite achievements. Also, having a lot of customers and selling a product to the music industry, which is notoriously hard, is something I'm incredibly proud of. And yeah, those would probably be the main ones. But it's more that I enjoy the journey rather than the end result, you know.
That's true. Even it's the same thing with me. I love the journey. So great, awesome. So, what is one piece of advice would you like to give to our female entrepreneurs or someone who wants to get into you know, music, AI, or tech industry, or maybe just to follow their dreams?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, I bet it's the same with Coders Mojo. It's like there's no one version where you're like, finally, this is success. This is the end result. Now I don't have to do anything else. It's a process, right? It's building on the project as you go. But the one piece of advice that I often give, or that I would give, would be about resilience. For women. And I use the example of when I was working in the record store in the UK, and I'd only ever worked in like retail, worked in a shop. So like kind of similar to like working in F&B in Singapore. And I thought, how am I ever going to get out of this into like an office job, you know, or like a career job? Because I didn't really have anyone that could help me do that. And so I basically just started applying for jobs whilst I was still working at the record store. And I applied for maybe 100, 150 jobs. And it took me about a year and a half before I got one interview. And that one interview was at Shazam. So luckily I interviewed quite well. So that worked out quite well for me. But, you know, I have so many friends and so many other women that I've mentored where, you know, they'll see a job on LinkedIn and they'll be like, oh, this is the perfect job. This is perfect for me. And they will, you know, they'll apply for that job. And then, as you know, sometimes you never even hear back from these places. You know, maybe the company just put the job up to like see who was out there. Maybe they put the job up because they legally have to, but they're going to hire internally. And so some of the women, they wouldn't hear back and they'd get so rejected and be like, oh, no, forget it. I don't, that's over. And I'd be like, no, that's not how it works. It's like, if you gotta send out 10 resumes, if you gotta send out 20, 50, 100, 150, like eventually you will get the break. But if you quit after the first CV is sent out and you don't hear back, then you can't be successful. So really the key thing that you need is that grit and resilience. And the other thing as well, super relevant to your to your business, is the ability to code is incredibly valuable these days. And at my age, there were no coding classes when I finished my education 15 years ago. But I think what I'm seeing now with a lot of young women and young men even is that a lot of them have the ability to code, or a deeper understanding of technology, as well as other passions. So, marketers who can code, musicians who can code. And I think that's really exciting and hopeful for the next generation. They're definitely smarter.
That's true, actually. So people who are actually watching this video, they should know that building resilience is one such skill you should make sure that you build in a life. And second thing is start to code or learn how to code if you're not a coder. Okay, and the last question that we have is, what is one thing that you want to change in your life? In this world, not your life. Your life is already awesome. So what is one thing that you want to change in this world, and why?
Well, okay, so rather selfishly and rather topically, and this obviously, if anyone's watching this video a year from when we recorded it, might not make any sense, but I would get rid of the global pandemic. Because I'm in Singapore, which is great, and I'm very happy to be here. The country has got the situation very much under control, but I'm from the UK and I can't travel back and see my family. Who I really miss, because my brother has young children, my sister has young children, both my parents are still in the UK, and I would have been back minimum 3 times this year, and I haven't been back at all. So that's the thing I miss the most, because what is life except family and friends, right? That's the most important thing. So I kind of accept that there's no travel at the minute, and so that's the way it's got to be. But yeah, that would be, if I could just click my fingers, I'd probably be booking a flight right now. That would be the thing I would change.
Great. Yeah, we also want to change this pandemic scene right now. Last question. What are your favorite books?
Oh, great question. Amazingly, okay, and none of these are incredibly relevant to what I do for a career, but I'm a huge fan of post-apocalyptic fiction. And my favorite book in the world is called On the Beach by Neville Shute. And it was probably the first book in this genre that I read, and it's amazing. And I've read a lot of Neville Shute's work now, and it's really incredible. So that's one. But then I would say that's just reading for pleasure. But on the business side of it, there are a few incredible books as well. I forget the name of it, but there's a book by Brad Feld that gets referred to as the White Book, and it's basically the Bible on VC investment. All the terms explained, all the maths explained. And I have to say, if you read this book when you were not fundraising, it would seem like the world's most boring book. But when you're physically raising money and you need to understand liquidation, valuation, equity, all these things, it just lays the whole thing out, and you can just keep going back to it chapter by chapter. I think it might even be in the office behind me. I think I keep it up here. And it's known as the White Book because the cover is white, but I forget the real name of it. I'll look it up for you.
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot, Hazel. That's it from our side. Thanks a lot. It's been a great conversation, and thanks a lot for sharing your journey.